I'm Melissa from Gamban, and welcome to our gaming gambling jam session with Game Quitters. Joining us on the webinar today, we have Cam Adair, an international speaker who is widely known as the leading expert on video game addiction. Cam is the founder of Game Quitters, a support community for gamers, and more recently is a co-founder of Intenta, equipping mental health professionals with resources on digital disorders. Thank you very much for joining us today, Cam. Also, we have Mike Wall from Gamban. Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I'm the digital marketing manager for Gamban. So as such, I just run all of the marketing operations. But I'm also an avid gamer, and of course, working within the gambling space kind of gives me a bit of a unique perspective. Seeing where the lines blur between gambling and gaming. And like I say, as it's an interest of mine, it's just something that I'm just keen to kind of get more involved with and just learn as much as I can.
Great, thank you, Mike. For those who may not be familiar with Gamban, in a nutshell, Gamban is an application that can be just installed on devices, phone, tablets, computers, and such, which blocks access to online gambling. You could look at Gamban as a digital recovery tool that can be administered as part of a treatment plan. A tool that individuals can use themselves to stop or take a break from gambling, a prevention tool or global online self-exclusion. Unregulated sites are included in our block list, as is crypto, blockchain, and skins betting. Gamban is designed to be very difficult to circumvent or uninstall, but it is not intended to be a standalone solution. It's a barrier to online gambling and a tool that can be used alongside other resources to aid willpower. In addition to Gamban being available to individuals at any time, we also work with many different organisations, including operators, treatment providers, financial institutions, and governments. I'm now going to pass over to Cam to tell us more about Game Quitters and Intenta. Cam.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you having me. And so Game Quitters is a peer support community for people who struggle with a video game addiction. We share educational resources, videos, articles, support forums, and really try and leverage the fact that there's a lot of people out there who are struggling with these issues. And if we bring them together, they're able to share a lot of resources and support for one another. We also have programs on there for gamers, parents, and professionals. And Intenta is a new company that we have just launched, really designed to help fill the skill gap that currently exists with clinicians on gaming issues, especially, and more broadly, digital disorders. So we're about to launch our first clinical training for gaming disorder, and that's available at intenta.digital. And both projects for me are a huge passion, and I'm very excited to be here to share more about them.
Great, thank you, Cam. That's a great overview there. So our first topic for our session today is gaming and gambling regulation. The current regulations, changes that we feel are needed to the current regulations, and the improvements to industry and players from changes that could be made. Mike, do you want to kick off here?
Yeah, of course. So regulations when it comes to this kind of thing is a bit of a strange one, considering it's such a new market space. There isn't a whole lot in place, and but what is there has kind of been designed to try and keep gambling out of gaming as much as possible. But with the rise of things like loot boxes, eSports, skins gambling, it's pretty clear that gambling is kind of creeping its way into the industry. If not through, clear apparent, this is, traditional gambling, either through sort of a strange kind of loophole where, essentially normally with gambling, you put in something, and then there's a chance you might win, and then you either do win something of value or you don't. So a lot of the time, these companies will kind of work around that by offering something with no intrinsic value. So it'll be an item in game that you can only use in that game. You can't really do anything else with it. But of course, you've got skins gambling. It kind of steps outside of that box, and that's when it truly, you could argue these are kind of gambling items. It has an intrinsic value, but that is kind of like where most of it lies in terms of like regulations. There's not a whole lot so much to speak of that's specific to video games. It'll be kind of gambling regulations that's sort of been aimed towards vaguely recognizable to gaming, and they kind of believe that's, as it stands, enough. But as it becomes more and more of a commonplace thing, more regulations should appear, but I believe it's going to be a slow process, at least to start with.
Yeah.
And
what do you think, Cam?
Yeah, I think it's important to just understand, how this has all come about, which is, currently there's obviously a very blurry line between gaming and gambling. There's technical definitions of gambling for, regulations, and then there's sort of what people perceive as gambling, and that's where this line is really getting blurry. But a big kind of current trend within the industry is just the gambling regulations as they relate to online gambling and new technologies, new products, smartphones coming in. It's just been slow for the gambling regulations to really catch up. And so I think it's important to understand that with technology evolving so rapidly and with digital products also evolving technologically, it's caused this point where gambling regulations have been slow to move to the virtual online world through online gambling, and gaming, is just moving at such a pace that far exceeds gambling regulations. So we've kind of caught ourselves in this like awkward moment of there are certainly some not just blurry lines, but there's certainly some gambling that's occurring in gaming through eSports that is currently not regulated like it would be if it was a traditional sport. And a lot of that's happened because eSports itself has found itself in this kind of awkward stage of like, is it a sport? Is it not? It's online, but it's also in person. And where do those lines really need to be drawn?
Yeah, because I'm finding as well, as more bigger casinos and operators are kind of picking up on esports, things are happening within regulation. But before then, it was pretty much like you said, nothing happened at all. It was only once a lot of noise was made about it, as some of the bigger players realized this is like a viable thing, was before like, the regulation really kind of picked up and anything was put into place.
Exactly. And I think it's, also just important to note that gambling as it relates to games and video games happens across different layers. So, there's esports and there's esports betting. There's loot boxes and what those mean kind of in games themselves. There's simulated gambling, social casino type games. There's skins betting, and there's different layers to it, and each one is going to kind of move at a different pace. But certainly, I think there's enough, big players in there now, and there's enough similarity between gambling products that more regulations need to be updated soon.
Absolutely. I mean, are we seeing any of these conversations with the regulators at the moment? Do we have kind of timeframes, or are we seeing any action actually taking place in this space at the moment?
Nothing worth really noting about. I mean, when skins gambling firstly came out, and Valve, who basically the company that kind of in a way allowed this to happen, they supply the games which you can skins gamble with. They don't agree with it at all. So essentially, it's a completely illegal practice, and they were running like a black market sites. And to try and like shut them all down, regulation was put into place, but that was kind of put at the need of almost like a company who was losing out or receiving like bad PR, as opposed to player protection. So that's what we saw on that side. But I mean, there's a lot of talk about loot boxes and that kind of thing, and an addiction around loot boxes. But it seems to be that you're almost inundated with articles, things on the news about people getting gambling addiction from gaming, getting addicted to buying loot boxes, addicted to all these different things. And they might get a bit of backing. There might be someone, potentially like an MP or someone like in Parliament or someone high up would say, "Oh yeah, well, we agree, something needs to be done about this." But in reality, they are pretty slow to the uptick. It's just it's a lot of people just kind of talking about the same thing, agreeing it's a problem, and then nothing is kind of being moved on to the next step.
Yeah, definitely a lot more that needs to be done with regulation in this space. So next we have eSports gambling, a massive topic at the moment. A couple of thoughts to start out here. Does eSports gambling appeal to a younger audience, which gambling would not appeal to otherwise? And is there a lack of protection around eSports? Cam, what do you think?
It's important to state that esports is a massive part about what makes up gaming and gaming culture and the community aspect of games. So gamers spend just as much time playing video games as they do watching other people play. Now, esports is organized professional gaming, but it also occurs through the college level and the high school level and middle school, even now in the US. And so there's a massive acceleration currently of developing infrastructure for competitive gaming play from young ages all the way up. And so esports is a huge part of what makes up someone who likes video games. Now, a few stats I can share: 32% of 16 to 24-year-olds watch esports tournaments. That's grown 60% in the last year. And a report came out by Gamble Aware that 96% of 11 to 24-year-olds had seen gambling ads in the last month. Esports betting has grown 40 times during COVID-19, and betting volume to FIFA and NBA 2K actually has grown 80%. And that's been a big crossover between traditional sports and esports. So, esports gambling, does it appeal to younger people? Absolutely. It's one of those products that will be, I think, one of the first ways that a lot of younger people will get into gambling. And esports betting are, ads are all over esports tournaments. Companies sponsor gaming influencers, so it's very difficult to pay attention to esports and not be exposed to esports betting.
Wow, those are some really big numbers there. I mean, another thought I had on this subject was kind of that this may be easily corrupted from an integrity standpoint, as a lot of games are played and then streamed an hour later or something. How do we think that we can keep integrity in gaming as we begin to essentially gamble on these games?
I mean, it's a tough one because, like Cam said, the viewership and their audience is quite a young one. I mean, I think most people can agree that you want to keep children away from especially like gambling and like marketing material, any adverts and that kind of thing. But absolutely right. If that's the kind of the key audience, these are the people who intrinsically like gaming, and then therefore gaming tournaments would then appeal to. Of course, they're going to see the ads. But yeah, I think there needs to be greater emphasis on just how to kind of protect that younger audience, especially. Be aware that that's your main demographic, not kind of say, oh no, we do advertise gambling for sure, but that's only for people of the age to do it. They can't be kind of blind to the younger people who do watch these these events, these streams. All you have to do is go to one, and you can kind of one of these like events, and you will see that the main audience there is anywhere between sort of 13 to 24, just by looking around the room. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There's kind of gambling material everywhere. It's just like going to like a normal sports game essentially, but where the core audience is almost like shifted down by a entire demographic of age.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, yeah, I'll just share a bit more, I guess. So for me, there was a recent tournament called Blast Premier in London for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. And during this tournament, I did a case study on Twitter about it, but there is of all the sponsors for the tournament, there was only one non-esports betting sponsor.
Wow.
And every 2 minutes, there was an overlay across the screen, a pop-up gambling ad on the entire screen itself. The overlay had gambling ads at all times. Casters spoke about the odds during the game, every couple minutes, before the game, after the game. And the map itself was dynamically changed to add gambling adverts onto the map. And it was one of those instances for me where it was like, it wasn't like, a normal game where it's okay, you have 30 different sponsors and one of them is a gambling product or two are gambling products. This one, you were just bombarded constantly with esports betting and casters talking about it. And my larger concern overall is not just competitive play and where gambling's coming into that, but where gambling's coming into streaming, because there's a lot of streamers currently who play video games and tens of thousands of people, millions of people are watching them, and they're spending time for entertainment purposes to open loot boxes and to be gambling essentially. And they're doing so because it's very entertaining for their audience to watch. But what is that kind of creating for young people in the way they're being influenced by the people they look up to? And I think that's one of the big differences as we look forward to the future, is that gaming has this sort of embedded culture of streamers and influencers and following them just as much as you actually play yourself, and then competitive play on top of that. And there's just so many different ways that gambling can find itself in gaming, and it's difficult to regulate a lot of that, both from a legal standpoint and from just a platform like Twitch standpoint. So I think those are a big part of the conversation that needs to take place as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose because the gaming industry itself is so, revolutionary. Essentially, everyone's trying to find like the new thing, not so much the new way to make money, but everyone's trying to innovate in a different way to make something new and interesting. And so because of that, something comes along that's brand new. It may involve, either like a paywall or some form of gambling, but no one ever sees it coming. And by the time that's kind of sorted out, perhaps with either through regulation or through, when they kind of tone it down, there'll be something new around the corner. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that loot boxes were like a brand new thing, and now we've kind of, and then before that it was microtransactions, and then before that it was DRC. All these new kind of innovative ways of having people just sort of part with their money in just new creative ideas. But yeah, it won't be too long before everyone forgets about this, and then they'll move on to the next one and be like, we need more regulation around this new kind of mechanism in this game that no one's ever seen before, which everyone is now doing because it's so profitable.
Yeah, and do we think that the gambling aspects within video games have any influence on the addictiveness of that game? So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, without that gambling aspect of being able, to purchase loot boxes, to be involved in skins betting, would these video games have that same addictiveness, if you like, if you took the aspect of gambling out of it? What do we think?
Well, a good example of this is actually Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So Counter-Strike is, one of the kind of all-time great series of games. I played Counter-Strike 1.6 growing up, and now CS:GO or Global Offensive is the new one, is one of the biggest games in the world. Now, a lot of people don't know that when Counter-Strike Global Offensive first released, it actually was a big flop in the gaming community. And then they instituted the opportunity to get skins in the game. So skins are kind of cosmetic items where you can turn your gun, for instance, into, say, a Game of Thrones type theme. And it allows you to change and customize your character or your weapons. And this one feature, adding skins into CS:GO, actually exploded the popularity of the game. It also exploded the revenue in the game. And so these sorts of mechanics have been hugely popular across the industry. They've been extremely profitable for the industry. And I'm the one who's getting the report saying, I'm a 13-year-old. I just placed my first bet because my friends were peer pressuring me. Or there was a great Polygon article about Fortnite where students were being bullied at school for not having cool cosmetic items in these games. And there's a lot of other stories like that of even problem gamblers who had relapsed into gambling after being exposed to loot box animations because they're very similar to slot machines. And so, I think there's a lot of concerns about these sorts of mechanics in games and how they normalize attitudes towards gambling. They make it seem more normal and safe. And if you win a loot box, it maybe allows you to think that if you went into a casino and you played slots, you might have the same sort of chance to win there. And so there's a lot of concerns about it. The research, I think, has been in one direction, which is that they're very psychologically the same as gambling. And people, especially who are vulnerable to gambling, tend to really struggle with loot boxes and those sorts of mechanics. And they've been extremely profitable for the industry. So, there's a number of concerns there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can always say like in terms of like gambling, essentially when you win, you kind of get that dopamine rush. So you're on slots, you've just run the slots through, you've won, that's great, and you want to do it again. You're always chasing that rush. And essentially with these kind of like these microtransactions, also the loot boxes, it's kind of the same theory where while they do argue you win something every time, just because you win something doesn't mean it's something of value. So it has like a random chance to get like out of 10 items and you only want 2 of them, say. The other 8 may as well just be, you win nothing. But because you gain something out of it, that's the kind of the loophole. And like, oh, it's not technically gambling because you win every time, but it doesn't mean you win something you want every time. But again, same kind of dopamine rush. If you do win it, wonderful. And even if you don't win it, you still win something, which kind of encourages you to continue because you feel it's not valueless. There's never any value not attributed to every win, but it just might be something that you don't really want.
Yeah, and do we see kind of the same chasing losses, if you like, within gaming that we see in gambling, whereby if you're not winning the character or the skin or the item it is that you want, you will continuously, to put more money in and spend more money, kind of chasing what you see as a loss of not winning what you wanted to win within the game.
Yeah, I would say so.
Absolutely. And a lot of these loot box animations have near miss or near win mechanics in there. CSGO is a great example. It looks just like a slot machine would look where, oh, you're about to win this amazing item. And actually, it's just a very basic item. And this goes back to, my concern over influencers live streaming themselves, opening these cases. There's a live streamer whose name is Anomaly. And he's one of the most popular ones in the entire world. He can have upwards of like 50,000 people watching him live, millions of views. And in an interview, he shared that what exploded the popularity of his channel was actually when he started to open loot boxes during his streams, because people really enjoyed the entertainment content. But on his streams, he will open hundreds of loot boxes in a short period of time, which can cost $500 or $1,000 or more. And so during the live stream, he's opening all these loot boxes, which is far more than, most players will be spending on them or playing at the same time. But then his YouTube clips will be edited where down to 5 minutes, he says, I've opened 100 loot boxes. Look at all the things I won. And it makes it appear like he's winning a lot more frequently than he actually is. And then so when someone like, an adolescent or a teen or a young adult is watching this video, they then go into the game and they spend, say $20, they get 4 cases, they buy them, they don't win anything as awesome as what they just saw on YouTube. And so then they want to spend more thinking they have that same sort of chance, when it's more the editing actually creates that perception. So, and his channel isn't actually age gated behind a mature rating or 18 plus. at all. And even a weekly series he does is he gets drunk with his dad gets drunk every time he wins a really special item. And these are the sorts of kind of content out there that kids are being exposed to that are blurring gaming and gambling and entertainment. And I think there's a lot of concerns to be had.
Yeah, because there's a lot of parallels between, say, gaming streamers and even in gambling affiliates, where essentially they will do the same thing. Stream for about 6 hours, edit down to the best bits. So if a kid's watching a YouTube video of unboxing 100 loot boxes, winning loads of great prizes, there's not much to say that they wouldn't move on to someone playing an online slot machine, with a very kind of clickbaity title, like, I spent 100 and I won 80 grand. That's essentially the same as I opened up 10 boxes and I got like, 2 amazing skins. It's essentially the kind of the same content is repackaged for what you'd assume would be a different audience, but it wouldn't be unfair to say that one would see, the gaming one, and then would be more inclined to move on to the gambling one in the future. It's essentially kind of the same video.
Yeah, I mean, I think the live aspect definitely plays a part. Just yesterday, actually, I was watching, something popped up on my Facebook, and it was somebody live streaming themselves scratching off scratch cards. And this video must have been about an hour long, and there was just stacks and stacks of these scratches. And it made me think, who is watching this, and does it being live make it more exciting? Or for me, I
I'd
saw
say so.
scratches just being scratched off and winning every 10 cards or something. But for me, that kind of sounds similar to these live streamings of opening up these loot boxes and things. So it's not kind of just within gaming that the live streaming of these things happens.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things as well where part of the entertainment value is just a kind of sense of community. They watch them scratch these cards, watch them open loot boxes, watch them play slots. But if they win, because you're kind of there and it's live, it's kind of like it's your win as well. It's like the community's win. And sometimes they kind of they'll say, I'm going to open 1,000 loot boxes, or I'm going to spend like 100 grand. It'll be like an outrageous thing that they're doing to attract people onto that. Like I've played games for like years, but I've never been sat on like that many loot boxes at any one time. So if someone is concurrently opening 1,000 boxes in a row, that even to me is kind of it's interesting. I've never seen that before, and I would probably watch it. And then you get kind of involved in it as well. You get excited when they're excited, you're excited. They've won something great. You feel like, oh, that's amazing. They've actually won something really good out of that. Their highs are your highs and their lows are your lows.
Exactly. And just to kind of I guess wrap this part up, is there was a streamer I've watched. I catalog a bunch of this stuff, but there was a streamer I watched who, he had a mission of opening, let's say, 1,000 of these cases. And it's important to state that when they're opening these boxes, and on stream, they might spend $1,000, to do it, but the money they're receiving from the views, from the ads, from the donations far exceeds that. And there was one streamer in particular, I have a video of it, where he was opening hundreds of boxes, and then he was down to sort of like the last one or two, and for 45 minutes he was saying, I'm not going to open up this last box until we reach our goal for the day of donations. And for 45 minutes he kept hyping it up, like, okay, in 5 minutes I'm going to open this box. Oh no, we need 50 more donations before we do it. We need 500 more donations. And he was getting his whole community to donate, to share money, to send in bits, and really hyping up this final box, but over the course of 45 minutes. And that's where you're really feeling that sense of community. You're getting involved in it, but you're also opening all these boxes, you're gambling from donations that other people are sending you. And so you're able to create that content because you're benefiting from it. But what about the path of destruction that you've just laid amongst your audience who now maybe think that they too could, be able to gamble in that way and win these items and kind of feel popular as well. And, that's really where I think a lot of people miss that aspect of it.
I think that's excellent the way that you summarise that. I think that's a very, very good point of view there. So looking at gambling themes in video games, do gambling themes affect younger people? Are young gamers being primed for gambling? I mean, we've covered some of these bits already. The gaming features influencing gamers to gamble. And what, if anything, are gaming organisations doing to improve at the moment?
I mean, this was quite interesting because for the longest time, I mean, gambling it's always been a bit of a strange kind of like taboo subject, but the kind of the themes and just gambling in general, not the actual function of it, but there'll be like so say in like the original like Sonic or something, there's like the casino zone, and then in Mario Party there'll be like a game themed around slots, or these aren't just games. You could always argue games that have gambling in them are inherently targeted for an older audience. To say like GTA Online, they recently put in there like a casino, but like I say, you could always argue that's for adults. But then these gambling like motifs in games clearly designed for like younger children. How does that kind of warp their perception of it? Because they're playing a fun game and then they have a casino zone, and then they think, because this game is fun and the casino level is fun, then surely a casino will be fun.
Exactly. And, this is where like the normalizing attitudes is taking place, but I also think, if we're looking at what are companies doing, the fact is that gaming companies are able to innovate faster than regulations are able to innovate. And so we even started to see this where, because loot boxes have got a lot of attention, a lot of games have begun to remove quote unquote loot boxes and shifted to more of a battle pass type monetization strategy, where the same mechanics exist in some of these games, but they're just calling it something else. Or another challenge is there's 30 different types of loot boxes. And so it can be very difficult to kind of actually regulate them without when they're evolving so rapidly. And some other companies, especially last year when the US FTC, Federal Trade Commission, was doing an investigation into loot boxes, they came out on the day of the workshop and announced that the three biggest gaming companies out there were going to begin to disclose the odds of loot boxes for players in an act of transparency by the industry. But we know that disclosing odds isn't going to prevent many people who have problematic gambling situations from gambling, because many problematic gamblers actually have distorted thoughts and beliefs about their odds. So even disclosing their odds isn't necessarily going to stop them. If anything, certain percentage of them will be more likely to gamble because of that. So I think it's really important that we recognize there are acts that the companies could be doing that would be much more effective at preventing these problems, but they're not instituting those policies. They're instituting policies that get good headlines, like we're going to disclose the odds, or we're going to add a, in my opinion, unclear warning label to games with loot boxes, without actually taking these steps forward that could really actually help prevent these issues from taking place for vulnerable users like adolescents or young people. So, companies are innovating quicker than regulations are able to, and I think we're going to continue to see that take place more and more.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Essentially, every game has its own unique perspective on things like loot boxes. So one broad regularization wouldn't cover certain things. So like FIFA, for instance, essentially you buy the packs to get the players to play better. So you can argue that's a kind of a pay to win system, and especially where you play online as well, whoever sinks in the most money could have like the better team. Whereas things like Counter-Strike is purely cosmetic. Although then you go on to like the skins gambling from Counter-Strike. But for the sake of this, yeah, it's just purely cosmetic. Having a better skin doesn't make you a better player.
Interesting. So as we've touched upon skins, I think that was the next topic for people who may not be aware. What is skins gambling? Is it regulated? If so, how so? Valve's response to skins gambling. I think Mike, you touched upon that already. And how can we protect the younger audiences from skins gambling?
So in CS:GO specifically is the easy one to get to talk about. So just throughout the game, you can obtain cosmetic changes, skins for weapons or characters via like in-game loot boxes, loot drops. They have many different names, with certain skins being rarer than other ones. So the players can then trade these skins to each other. This is exclusive to I believe it's CS:GO. Is it Cam? Is it League of Legends, Dota?
Yeah, I believe they have it as well.
Yeah, so there's a handful of games, and they all run through Steam. So the players can then trade these skins with each other, or buy and sell them for funds within their Steam wallet. So it's kept within the Steam gaming platform itself, which they can then use to like purchase games or other items within Steam. But they can't sell them for real world currency. But this is where the problem lies in. Third-party gambling websites unaffiliated with Steam or Valve have they offer venues where people can use these skins as essentially casino chips, betting them on either on professional eSports matches or even at sort of simulated tabletop games like roulette or blackjack. Then when a player win or loses, the skin they have wagered gets automatically traded through via the Steam bots controlled by a third-party gambling site, which is then offered to cash those skins for a real currency. So that's where the trouble in lies, because Valve has outwardly said this is not okay. We do not agree with it. It's essentially it's a legal practice. These things are black market sites. But the issue is kids will play these games, get these skins. They maybe have seen affiliation with these kind of gambling sites. These skins gambling sites was a real big problem a few years ago. It was very difficult to be involved in the CS:GO community without knowing about that. Massive influencers would show their winning, show how they won like a rare knife skin, and then use that as casino chips to then win even more money. And they were just like, oh, it's so easy, you can win it like this. But yeah, essentially Valve has kind of come out and said this is not okay, but it didn't really solve the problem. It's still very much there, and it's still kind of there even to this day. And it's one of the easier methods for underage people to gamble. It's essentially a currency exclusive to this one kind of subset of people. It doesn't involve any kind of bank details. It's kind of like cryptocurrency in a way. It's just an easy way for these people to just kind of to gamble without having to be like of age, and where it's kind of the black market site as well. It's not unfair to say that their practices are slightly dodgy, and they can't let anyone join.
Exactly. And it's I'll talk a bit about skins gambling and sort of the actual betting market, but I just want to reiterate for everyone listening that yes, there's actual skin gambling, taking skins and betting them on different events, but even the act of obtaining skins in CS:GO specifically is very, very similar to playing a slot machine. The only difference is that you can't cash out those skins for real money, but even that is very much a gray area because there are a lot of third-party sites where you are able to do that. Valve currently has a 7-day cooldown on being able to trade items after you obtain them, which stops some of it, but not all of it. And many of these influencers who are currently opening hundreds of cases on stream, they are describing it as I just won an item that is $500. I just won an item that's worth $10,000. And, back to Anomaly, who I spoke about earlier, the influencer, he did a video actually calculating how much money he has spent gambling in Counter-Strike and how much money he has won. So although Valve has shut down some of these sites' abilities to profit from this sort of gambling market, it's not completely shut down. And at the time that Valve had actually instituted skins into their game, and then that exploded the game, the CSGO gambling industry was worth $7.4 billion in July 2016, and over 3 million players had actually wagered $2.3 billion worth of skins. And Valve received a 15% kickback on all of that. And I haven't heard anything about Valve putting forward any preventative measures or taking any of that money and saying, we're going to help educate people on the risks of gambling, right? So I would love to hear from Valve, where did that money go? Because although they shut down some of these abilities to do it, they did profit very substantially from it. And kids were gambling in this instance. So I think that's important to note. Currently, there's a report out by Parent Zone that found 27% of children aged 13 to 18 have heard of skin gambling, 10% have gambled skins in some form, and 36% of those who knew about skin gambling had gambled skins. So skins in this instance are basically used as chips to bet on esports or to play casino games. And there are third-party sites where you're able to cash out for real money. So it is still very much a big issue today.
Wow. I mean, in regards to kind of protecting children or any players kind of from the gambling within gaming, I mean, I know that you just mentioned Valve and how we would have liked to have seen something come from them from all of that revenue they collected. Where do we think that education and awareness needs to be aimed at? Is it at the people playing the games? Is it at the children? Is it to the parents? Where does this effort need to be focused?
Yeah, I believe the onus with that one is left with Valve, because essentially they provide the platform, they know the player base, so Steam is the platform where the games are they're sat. So they are pretty much in front of their audience all the time. And in reality, for them, it wouldn't be too difficult even to run sort of a slight awareness campaign, just produce even the smallest amount of content to put in front of their audiences. They definitely have the facility to do so. But I believe, more awareness around, for parents. I mean, if I went out to my mum and said, do you know what skins gambling is? She wouldn't even if she kind of knew the concept of it, she wouldn't understand exactly how it works. And because of it being such a strange, complicated process, it seems intimidating. But for the younger, sort of technologically advanced, youth group, for them, it's just like, oh yeah, I can kind of figure that out. It's not like a problem for me. But for anyone else, they'd see that and then, wouldn't even dare touch it, let alone attempt to understand it. And when you don't understand something, how can you kind of be aware of it? How can you kind of know it's a dangerous thing without knowing exactly how it works? I mean, you could say skins gambling is dangerous. It's lose those are kind of buzzwords and stuff, but that doesn't help parents understand exactly how to protect their children from it. A parental control put on a computer may not be enough, considering it's a gaming platform for one, and then the other one would be a black market site, which may or may not be kind of blacklisted by parental control software. I mean, that's the kind of thing where Gamban sort of fits into this quite nicely, is that Gamban does sort of blanket block all of these black market sites as well. So essentially, as more people kind of grow awareness of it, hopefully people's ideas on how to protect their children and even prevent themselves from kind of accessing these websites kind of grows with it. But I believe for the most part, Valve should really kind of step up to the plate here, not just say, oh, we don't agree with it, and then bury their head in the sand. They need to kind of actively push and say, here's the problem, here's kind of how it works. Here's here's like a potential solution, or here's how you can protect yourself or your children. And I suppose they should work with their audience as much as they should work with the parents of at-risk children.
Exactly. And often it's, companies are blaming parents for it's their responsibility what their kids are doing, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's a convenient argument because it kind of conceptually makes sense, right? Like, okay, it's your parent, they're supposed to be responsible for you, they need to know what's going on. But it's very difficult for parents to understand that these mechanics are even in games. For instance, in educational games targeted to even preschoolers, like very young kids, they have in-app purchases. And you might, as a parent, not really actually assume that a Disney game would have some in-app purchase mechanics where kids are being targeted to spend money when they're 6 years old, right? So it's very difficult for parents to know, and especially with how quickly these games innovate and evolve. And actually, the industry even came out with a report that said that only 32% of parents knew what a loot box was, and even less than a third of those could even select the correct definition. And loot boxes are quite popular, not only in games, but in sort of the mainstream news. There's a lot of attention about it. There's regulation attention about it. And only 32% of parents even knew what that was. And so when we start going into skins gambling or esports betting, it's even more difficult for parents to know the risks associated with that. And that's why I think it's very important that the industry itself begin to take steps forward, say working with Gamban or other partners to really actually restrict the ability for people underage to be able to play with these mechanics, or for these mechanics to be in these games in that sort of way. And also I think they need to be doing a lot more education for both parents and for gamers on the risks of gambling and the association of gambling and some of these mechanics, because it's not just opening loot boxes that's a problem. It's that's a simulated gambling and or gambling experience, and that has the risk. Because a lot of parents reported that their concern over loot boxes, for instance, was their kids spending money. And although kids spending money is a concern, my concern is kids gambling, because there's a lot more harm or potential harm that comes from that over the long term than just kids spending money. So I think, education is really important, and education for clinicians as well, because many clinicians have a difficult time understanding video games, understanding how they evolve, and understanding the mechanics that are in these games that are being played by many of their clients and are influencing them and their behavior. So that's a big part of what we do at Game Quitters, and we do at Intenta, trying to educate more people on these issues. But I have a lot of other ideas on regulations. If anyone's interested, you can reach out to me, and I'd be happy to talk to you more.
I think that's really well said as well. I mean, one of the things that I think I can safely say in regards to kind of gambling at the moment in certain jurisdictions, a lot of the counsellors and treatment providers are not aimed at the new age of gambling. So things are very much more focused on casinos, the bricks and mortar outlets. And problem gambling from that point of view. Whereas, with the advancement of technology, being able to gamble and game, on your devices, your smartphones and computers and such, we do need to kind of shift the focus a little bit of looking into the new digital age that we're in, and kind of having these services be applicable to how people are actually gaming or gambling now.
Yeah, because I suppose part of the problem would be, say, someone is gaming or skins gambling, they may not even realize that they are addicted to gambling. They're like, this isn't, as it's not a traditional gambling website, or it's not slots and not at a casino. Their perception of it is kind of so warped that they'll put so much money into it, but they're like, oh, it's not gambling, because gambling is something different. But because there's not much awareness built around it. These parallels haven't been drawn clear enough. Yeah, I genuinely believe like a lot of people can kind of get like these kind of addictions and not be able to kind of get the help that they receive anyway, because there's no kind of there's very little help geared towards these people as is, let alone the the awareness around these kind of like these solutions.
Absolutely. I mean, you need to understand. I mean, it's like Cam was saying, people need to understand how these games work, what the risks are, what a loot box is, what skins gambling is. People need to understand all of these different things to actually be able to provide help to people, which I think is really important. Well, I think we've kind of come to the end of our time here. I just wanted to thank you, Cam, for joining us in our little jam session today. It's been really good to look at these topics into more detail, and your insight and knowledge is fantastic as always. If anybody has any questions regarding game quitters or Intenter, Cam did just mention he does have more thoughts around the regulations and such. Please do reach out to Cam directly, or alternatively myself, and I can forward anything on to him. Likewise, if you would like any more information about Gamban, or you would like to discuss anything in regards to that, please do reach out to me, and thank you for listening.